A mystery killer stalks America. This is one of the biggest outbreaks ever to hit the nation, and people are terrified. Massive press attention sends the panic levels soaring. Could it be bioterrorism or a deadly new flu epidemic? With the clock ticking, a determined band of disease detectives race to find the killer's identity. But can they track it down before it strikes again? The 27th of July, 1976, Pennsylvania. A patient lies dying, his lungs fill with fluid, and he has a roaring fever.
Doctor! Please come, the doctor's here now.
The doctors suspect a bad case of common pneumonia, but they are mistaken. What the doctors don't know is that they are seeing the lethal handiwork of a deadly and previously unknown killer. This is day one of a massive disease outbreak that will claim 29 lives, leave a major American city facing financial turmoil, and baffle some of the world's finest scientific sleuths. The story begins a week before in Philadelphia. It is July 1976, and the world's most powerful nation is celebrating 200 years of freedom and prosperity. Thousands are on the streets, and the world looks on in awe. In this, the bicentennial year, Philadelphia, the home city of the American dream, is the only place to be. Thousands of veterans are arriving for their annual American Legion conference, and the atmosphere buzzes. Korean War veteran Joseph Adams is amongst the first to arrive.
We had a great big parade, and it drew a lot of people. I don't know if I could give you an honest count. I know it was over 5,000. Well, I can have a good time wherever I go, but it was a good time.
Come on, we're playing here. Come on,
Hang on.
big surprise.
I love this.
Oh, well, then now that's...
There we go.
Nice surprise, yeah.
There you go. Go down, Charlie.
First good surprise we've had in a while.
That's
There we go.
Hey.
To all the guys that didn't make it back.
Okay.
Charles Chamberlain, another Korean War veteran, parties with his old friends.
Good to see you. A little time.
Accompanying Charles to the convention is his wife, Henrietta.
Here we go. I'm gonna bet.
This was my husband's first time going to convention and mine. It was a party every night, so you partied every night and drank every night. And it was fun. It was fun. We really had a good time.
Here we go.
But these innocent revelers aren't alone.
When are we going out?
A hidden killer is stalking them.
All right, come on, Ralph.
After 3 days, the party breaks up. Charles, Joseph, and the guys return home. But they are taking more than good memories with them.
Philadelphia's a beautiful city, it really is, and the hotel was gorgeous.
Charles and Henrietta are back in Chambersburg, 250 kilometers from Philadelphia, and a world away from the partying of the previous week. Just 2 days after their return, Charles starts to cough and feels unwell. Henrietta thinks it must be a severe case of flu.
His fever was 102, 103 then, you know. I knew he had to go somewhere. He had to get some help. And that's when I said, you're going to the hospital. And he said, Henry, you're taking me in there to die. And I said, I am not. I'm taking you in there to get well.
3 days after returning from Philadelphia, Charles is rushed to hospital. The doctors diagnose severe flu and give him penicillin. But what they don't know is that inside Charles's body, his organs are beginning to fail. His lungs are filling with fluid, making it almost impossible for him to breathe. Lethal organisms inside his lungs are multiplying at an alarming rate and leaking into his blood. They are resistant to anything the doctors try.
They didn't have a clue. They did not know. They were stumped.
The situation is critical.
He kept getting colder and colder. His hand kept getting colder and colder.
Doctor! Doctor!
They said, we're going to put him on a respirator. We want you to step outside. So I stepped outside, and about 10 minutes they come out and said when they were putting him on the respirator, he died. And it was really a shock. You know, when you just take him in there and he's joking with me, and then all of a sudden he's gone.
Charles was only 47 years old. A week ago, he was the life and soul of the party in Philadelphia. The massive lung damage he suffered is typical of a common pneumonia death. The doctors have no reason to think he died of anything else. They do not realize this situation is being repeated across the states. In just 2 days, 10 more people are dead. Most were soldiers who survived the guns of war, only to be cut down in peacetime by a mystery killer. Joseph Adams, local Legion official, attends their funerals.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And some of them were 2 different places at the same day. And I would go to the funeral of one, I'd go to a wake of another, and they'd go on to somewhere else, so I'd be there the next day. I had a battery-operated shaver in my car, and I shaved between there and go on to the next wake.
Scattered as they are across the state, no one links their deaths. No one except Joseph. He is alarmed. This many deaths amongst a group of healthy men just doesn't make sense. Desperate, he tries to raise the alarm.
I called the city of Philadelphia health department that Sunday night, and I got the response back from the person on the other end of the phone that you'll have to call back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We're not open now. I said, lady, you don't realize that this is a real emergency. I got to talk to some doctor about this. Well, she says, well, I don't think you get the answer here. We're not open until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And the phone went dead.
But the number of deaths has reached epidemic proportions. Not willing to take no for an answer, Joseph and the Legion keep phoning the authorities. One of these calls is about to trigger the largest ever disease investigation in American history. Day 1, Atlanta, Georgia, the Center for Disease Control. It's the world's nerve center of epidemic research. Whenever there is an outbreak, it is their job to track down the source of the disease and stop the killer in its tracks. David Senser, Director of Global Disease Operations, arrives at work.
It was on Monday, August 2nd, 1976. I was walking down the hall, and one of the young epidemiologists said, have you heard about the influenza-like pneumonia deaths in Philadelphia? And I said, what? And so then they began filling me in, and that was the first I'd heard of it.
Senser calls in his top disease detective, Dr. David Fraser, and gives him the job of heading up the investigation.
That evening, David Senser called a meeting of all people at CDC who knew something about what was going on in Pennsylvania.
A doomsday scenario unfolds. Scientists in the CDC labs are already investigating cases of a strange flu virus in New Jersey that has infected hundreds in a matter of weeks. It is called swine flu and looks alarmingly like the flu virus that swept the world in 1918, killing millions. Could this killer in Pennsylvania be the same disease?
There was a real concern that this new strain could spread like the 1918 strain and cause hundreds of thousands of deaths.
Faced with the thought that he is seeing the early stages of a national epidemic, with 11 people dead and unknown numbers infected, Fraser sets off. But he won't be alone.
Good evening. In the past few days, a virus-like mystery illness has killed 15 persons that authorities know of and hospitalized at least 42 others.
News reaches investigative reporter Lawrence Altman in New York.
I first heard about the outbreak from the news desk at the New York Times, and this was the largest outbreak that I can recall.
As a qualified physician and former CDC insider, Altman is the right reporter for the job. As soon as he gets wind of the mystery illness in Philadelphia, he jumps in his car and heads straight down.
Driving down, it was listening to news reports, and they were just reporting and repeating the same information. It was hard to change stations and get something else.
It was not until today, when death certificates came pouring into the State American Legion headquarters, that officials realized what was happening.
I had no idea what was going to evolve. One assumed that they would find the cause in the next few days.
State health officials admit they do not know the cause of death.
Day 2. 4 more people are dead, bringing the total to 15. Dr. David Fraser arrives in Pennsylvania to begin the investigation. But before he can even begin to think about the enormous task that awaits him, he is besieged by the news-hungry press.
I had had some experience with the press in earlier investigations, but nothing as intense as this. At the beginning of the investigation, I had 2 reporters sitting on my desk, peppering me with questions of what the disease was, what the symptoms were, how could it be treated, how many cases were there, what were the next steps in the investigation. And I hadn't figured out yet what we were going to do.
I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you anything until I know something definitive.
Right.
That would be irresponsible for me to do otherwise, right?
With a press conference tomorrow.
You follow the story, and I think that that's the way science works. It's also the way journalism works. So I think it was a mirror reflection of each on the other.
Given the massive press attention, the public is panicking. Phone lines have been set up to try to calm their fears. They receive more than 90 calls an hour.
Have you been to the convention? I don't want to alarm you, but I think it's better to be safe than, sorry. So I would call your doctor and check it out with him.
The information gained from the phone lines and hospitals gives Fraser his first major lead. All the victims attended the July Legion Convention in Philadelphia.
We didn't know how many people had been at the convention. We knew probably of 25, 30 cases of this disease, but we had not had physicians out examining people to report back in a systematic way what their symptoms were, what their x-ray looked like, how they were responding to treatment.
But is there any other pattern to the sickness apart from the convention? Fraser desperately needs answers, so he devises a questionnaire for all those who attended the convention. But coming up with the questions is only part of the job. State Health Department printing presses are mobilized in a massive effort to print thousands of the forms. Fraser hopes that this exhaustive document will be a useful weapon in his battle against the mystery killer. Why has the killer struck here? How is it getting its victims? It asks every Legionnaire detailed questions about the convention. Did you use ice in your soft drinks? Were you in elevators at certain times? And so the list goes on. Fraser finds out to his horror that over 4,000 veterans and their wives attended the convention, staying at least 4 different hotels in the city. If he's going to solve this mystery, he needs help. Fortunately, he has a crack team at his disposal. The foot soldiers of the CDC are the EIS investigators, the Epidemic Intelligence Service. These disease detectives will be Fraser's men on the ground, his eyes and ears. One of these disease detectives is Dr. Steve Thacker. He is young, ambitious, and eager to crack his first real case.
I was on my first day in the job when my supervisor called and said, "Steve, we got a little problem in Pennsylvania, and we need you to go up." And so I was pretty eager to get there.
Thacker is now part of the largest team of disease investigators ever assigned to a single outbreak. Day 3.
All right, hey, listen up, everyone. Come on in.
Now that he has a team, head investigator Fraser can start to gather clues about what this mystery disease might be.
Good morning, good morning.
The questionnaire will be vital in this process. Armed with this massive document, the EIS officers fan out to the hospitals across the state and meet every single person who is sick with the mystery illness.
There's a lot of blank spaces up there, so you two, I want you on the questionnaires.
They must find out exactly what the patient's symptoms are, who has the disease, and if it's spreading.
Get hold of some of those people and hit the streets and maybe go door to door if necessary. I want some of those blanks filled in. All right, let's go.
Newly arrived from Washington, Steve Thacker heads to his first hospital. He has no idea what he will see.
The first hospital I went to was like you would see with smallpox or Ebola today. Head to toe, cape, gown. The last hospital I went to had 2 patients who had been ill but were survivors. And the infection control nurse, who was delightful, who met me at the door, showed me around, and before we went into the patient's room, she washed up. She washed her hands and gave me a mask. And that was their infection control procedures.
The different methods the hospitals employ give Thacker a clue. If hand washing is enough to stop the disease spreading, could that mean it's not as contagious as they first thought? He needs lab results to help him make sense of his hunch. The pressure is on for a quick answer. Luckily, there are helicopters on standby to fly the medical specimens to the Federal Disease Control Center in Atlanta. Day 4. Another 8 fatalities brings the death toll to 23. In the laboratories at the CDC, scientists have been testing the incoming samples. Their main focus is on the much-feared killer, swine flu. Are they seeing an outbreak of this lethal strain of influenza?
Well, I think the first thing that they looked into was to try and make sure that this was or was not influenza. Within 2 days, they had laboratory determination that this was not an influenza virus.
CDC Chief David Senser tells the team that to his relief, swine flu has been ruled out. But with swine flu discounted, the crucial question is, what can the killer be? CDC scientists test the samples from Philadelphia repeatedly, trying to find a match with their vast database of diseases. With their damaged lungs, high fevers, diarrhea, and delirium, the victims' immune systems are reacting to a massive infection. But is the killer behind this infection a virus or bacteria? Surely it's only a matter of time before the CDC, armed with the latest testing technology, find the answer. Following the huge advances in science in the 20th century, the atomic bomb, putting man on the moon, the American public have absolute faith in the ability of science to solve every mystery. They can't understand why it's taking scientists so long. It is only 4 days in, but at one of the daily press conferences held by the Pennsylvania Department of Health, spokesman Leonard Bachman finds that journalists are turning up the heat on the CDC to come up with an answer.
Rightly or wrongly, it's sort of come to expect miracles out of medical science these days, and we're into the 4th official day with no answer. What do you say to the public at this point?
Well, first of all, I have, in our effort to reform the health system in Pennsylvania, I have been saying that we better get away from that attitude. The health system doesn't produce miracles. We are human, and we do get sick, and we do have pain, and we do die, and the health system is not going to change that essential reality.
The chief investigators didn't like the presence of the journalists because it was a form of accountability that they were not used to. Here was the whole system under the microscopic eye, and the nation was watching.
The tense situation is made worse by the fact that 1976 is a presidential election year. President Ford is on the campaign trail in Pennsylvania, and the eyes of the world are on the state. In the highly charged political situation, fears about security are rife. When the investigation reveals that it's mainly Legionnaires that seem to be getting sick, rumors start to spread. could this be a terror plot?
This was 1976. It was an American Legion convention. It was the bicentennial. It was a mysterious ailment. There were many people beginning to think that this was sabotage. This was some malefactor who'd put a poison or an infectious agent in the soup.
Conspiracy theorists have a ready-made enemy. This is the era of the Cold War. Communist Russia is still seen as a huge threat to American security. It's only a year since US pulled out of Vietnam, the great battleground of communist versus American ideals. Nuclear holocaust is a very real concern, with thousands of atomic missiles poised, able to destroy the world at the touch of a red button. In this climate of fear, and with no answers from the CDC, even the idea of a plot to poison veterans seems possible.
There were certainly many people who saw evildoers in the shadows.
The 4-day Congress of the World Anti-Communist League is convening here to reaffirm, once again, international determination to oppose communism's drive to dominate the world. In the words of U.S. Congressman John M. Murphy, communism is a hydra-headed dragon and represents a constant threat to free men everywhere.
Congressman John Murphy, already convinced that the communists pose a serious threat to America, seizes on the idea that they might be behind the mystery deaths in Pennsylvania. He wastes no time calling David Sensor at the CDC to tell him his theory.
Yes, well...
Congressman Murphy was the person who was convinced that this was a chemical or biological warfare, and we were covering it up.
If we find anything that has that certain earmark or what have you, we will certainly notify you. Actually, we won't notify you. We'll notify the Defense Department.
Day 5. Another 2 people die, bringing the death toll to 25. How many more lives will be lost before the summer ends?
Good evening. The army of scientists hunting the source of the so-called Legion disease still has not found the enemy. Reporting today only gradual progress.
More and more we found out it wasn't any bacteria we knew, it wasn't any virus we knew, it certainly wasn't swine flu, it wasn't any fungus we knew, no rickettsial disease, no toxin that we could... so we were going with an unknown illness.
Fraser has put his faith in the detailed questionnaire to provide leads, but will it give him the answers he needs? His EIS officers have driven over 700 kilometers each in 2 days, pounding the streets, quizzing anyone and everyone who might have had some connection to the mystery killer. They can see the illness isn't spreading from person to person, so does that mean the killer was in the food or drinks? It has been almost a week since Joseph Adams raised the alarm. Now his every activity at the Legion convention, however obscure, comes under the microscope. Day 6. Thacker's data finally yields a vital discovery: the source of the infection. The Bellevue Stratford Hotel. Every one of the infected Legionnaires either stayed or spent some time there. Nelson Fellman was PR man for the hotel.
One day the Bellevue was filled with people and conventions, and in a week there was no one there. All people remembered was Bellevue Stratford, famous hotel, people dying, people getting sick, nobody staying at the hotel.
While most of the public can't get far enough away from the beleaguered hotel, one group actually wants to stay there.
Well, one of the thoughts I had when we moved from Harrisburg to Philadelphia was we had to house the investigators. Why not stay in the Bellevue Stratford? This seemed to be a good control group. If there was still active infection in the Bellevue Stratford, we might catch a break and find it this way.
Day 7. Another 2 deaths brings the total dead to 27. Strangely, none of Fraser's men or any hotel employees are getting ill, but other people who stayed at the hotel in July are reporting sickness. Fraser is more certain than ever that the killer came from the hotel, but can he find the evidence to prove it? He needs samples, so he gets the EIS investigators to go through the vast 754-bedroom hotel with a fine-tooth comb. The killer must be somewhere. They search for evidence of the killer in the bedrooms, the halls, the boiler rooms, but draw a blank. Fraser and the team have compiled a chart of the victim's movements around the hotel. They now see the most likely places that the killer struck. It gives Fraser an idea.
We got to know, like, where's this coming from? What's causing this?
My guess is the elevators.
The one time where I stepped over the line and had my theory, I think it came to me in a dream, I decided it was the elevators. We had epidemiologic evidence that time spent in the lobby of the hotel was associated with getting sick. We couldn't associate it with any of the meeting rooms, so I thought it had to be the elevators. And then people were moving up and down, and all that air could have been the source.
But when the team learn of a new case, it puts an end to Fraser's theory.
One woman I remember is an 80-year-old woman who went into the Bellevue Stratford at the side entrance, so she didn't go to the registration desk, used the ladies' room, was there for 20 minutes, and died about 2.5 weeks later.
The fact that this victim did not use the elevators means they must continue looking for a source. Where does this killer lurk? Why can't they find it? Atlanta, Georgia, day 10. While Fraser and the team look for the killer on the ground, the lab scientists look for traces in the body, but they don't seem to be able to find anything. They have now ruled out all known viruses and most bacterial diseases. Increasingly, they fear it might be something they have never seen before. They have one more known disease that they can try. Could the mystery killer be Q fever, a rare bacterial disease with similar symptoms? It falls to a newcomer to the CDC, Dr. Joe McDade, to check it out. Joe performs the tests, but there is no sign of Q fever anywhere. However, he does see something strange.
I found only an occasional rod-shaped bacterium, and I thought, well, these are probably bacterial contaminants. But when you get to that stage of the investigation, it's really incumbent upon everyone to examine every possible lead that you have to see whether or not there is anything that could be that could be associated with the outbreak.
So Joe gets his colleagues to repeat the tests to see if they can see these strange bacteria. They find nothing. Joe decides what he saw was a mistake. He files away his Q fever slides. What he doesn't realize is that he had in his hands a vital clue to solving the whole mystery.
I'd only been at CDC about a year at the time of the outbreak investigation, and there were a lot of very seasoned veterans, people who had been through many outbreak investigations, have been out in the field, and so when they have concluded the most likely interpretation of certain findings and results, you had to be pretty strong-minded to disagree with that.
With Q fever ruled out, Joe moves on. But what he has seen will stay with him, gnawing at the back of his mind. Week 2. The failure to find the cause of the outbreak is threatening to discredit the CDC. Under unrelenting pressure, Fraser heads back to the Bellevue Stratford to the room he is sharing with Steve Thacker.
We probably put in, 12, 14-hour days. And rooming with David, that didn't stop. So as soon as we got back to the room, he was on the phone. And trust me, after a while, I could sleep while they went on for hours.
Mm-hmm. Steve is hard at work right now. Can't slow him down. Oh, yeah.
Fraser's nightly call back to headquarters in Atlanta reveals just how lost they are.
Okay.
With negative results for all the testing of known viruses and bacteria and other infectious agents, we began to conclude we were dealing with either a new infectious agent that we didn't know or a toxin that could mimic the kind of infections that we'd been testing for.
The idea of a toxin is worrying. Could it mean that all the rumors of a terror plot to poison veterans are actually true? The CDC have already tested for a range of poisons and ruled them out. But reporter Lawrence Altman thinks that they have missed something vital. They have neglected to test for a lethal poison, which would have damaged the lungs in exactly the way doctors are seeing.
A Dr. F. William Sunderman Sr., who was familiar with nickel carbonyl, which is a metal, knew that it could cause symptoms that were similar: lung damage, high fevers, and raised that possibility. So that was another metal that hadn't been tested for, that should be tested for.
Larry Altman is an excellent health reporter. He wrote a series of articles on nickel carbonyl and how CDC had missed this diagnosis. Those were painful stories to read.
When the CDC investigate autopsy samples, the results seem to confirm Altman's theory. They find traces of the poison nickel carbonyl. But there is a further twist.
It turned out that they used the wrong utensils. They were contaminated already with metal, so the results were all a factor of contamination, so they were meaningless.
The press sees on the CDC's mistake.
Dr. Fraser.
If they can't even take the proper precautions in their tests, what chance do they have of solving one of the greatest medical mysteries of the 20th century? It is the end of the second week, and Fraser and the team desperately need a breakthrough. If the disease didn't pass from person to person or come from anything the victims ate or drank, something else must have carried it.
There was a novel infectious agent that was being spread through the air in the Bellevue, Stratford, and in the vicinity.
Could the killer be in the air conditioning system? With pipes and vents running through the whole hotel, it would be an efficient, pervasive mode of transport for a disease agent. The EIS team swabbed the system, but luck is not on their side.
They had been cleaning the air handling system between the convention and when we did the investigation with what turned out to be an effective cleaner.
A routine clean of the air conditioning systems before Fraser and the team arrived means they find nothing. Any clues of the killer have gone. The trail is cold. Fraser makes the decision to wind down the field investigation.
By the end of 3 weeks, we didn't have additional studies we knew to do in Pennsylvania. And so we wrapped up the investigation and sent the EIS officers back to their posts.
You got a lot done. You felt you accomplished a lot. You did what you're supposed to do, but it wasn't wrapped up.
There was still work to be done in the laboratory, but we needed new ideas to take the investigation further.
The CDC have spent nearly 70,000 man-hours on the case. With the field investigation over, all hope rests with the lab scientists who continue to work on the samples collected in Pennsylvania. With criticism mounting, David Sensor is keen to downplay public expectations.
There's a good chance of, there's an outside chance that we may never find out what has been the cause of this. I think we will. But there are times when diseases baffle all of us.
There are now 29 victims of the killer the press is calling Legionnaire's disease. Since there is no scientific explanation, people look for someone to blame. The focus falls on the Legionnaires. Henrietta and the other families are stigmatized and shunned.
Hi, Joan.
When I went back to work, The man came up to say it and said to me, he said, "Henry, we don't want you in here anymore. We don't know what your husband died of, and you may have something that you're carrying a germ or you're doing something, and you'll run our business away." I felt like I was, I had something the matter with me. That made me feel bad.
The Legionnaires and their families aren't the only victims of this killer. With the EIS investigators gone, the Bellevue Stratford is empty and on its knees financially. With the killer gone, PR man Nelson Feldman is trying to persuade people back to the hotel and Philadelphia. But he is about to discover the city has acquired a terrible reputation.
I was at a cocktail party, and I was introduced to a woman as being from Philadelphia. And she looked me in the eye and said, "How dare you come to Chicago and bring that disease with you?" And she turned on her heels and walked away from me. It was then it hit home that people outside of Philadelphia thought there was a plague in Philadelphia.
Since the start of the crisis, the hotel has been losing $10,000 a day. Despite Nelson's best efforts, the hotel has to close, crippled by debt, with its reputation in tatters.
It's not just the hotel. All of a sudden, the cab drivers had no fares. The restaurants in the vicinity of the hotel had no patrons. The city depended upon tourism and conventions for its livelihood, and all of a sudden, it dried up completely.
The effect on Philadelphia is devastating.
By the end of the crisis, when the hotel closed in November of 1976, Philadelphia had lost $60 million.
This is a special report from CBS News in Washington. Here is CBS News White House correspondent Phil Jones.
We're located right now here in the press room at the White House, where we are told that President Ford will issue a statement sometime within the next few minutes.
It is November, 3 months after the outbreak. The presidential election is over. Democratic candidate Jimmy Carter has beaten Ford. These are the first elections since Watergate, and everyone from the president down is riding on a squeaky clean ticket, vowing to clean up any government ineptitude. The CDC, as a government agency, is right in the firing line. There is public outcry at their failure to find out what the mystery killer is. Just before Thanksgiving, congressional hearings are convened to investigate the way the CDC has handled the case. And in charge is the CDC's harshest critic, Congressman Murphy.
He was still going on with his, why isn't this a biological chemical warfare, and why hadn't we investigated this, why hadn't we investigated that?
It was very unpleasant hearing in which he made it clear that CDC had messed up the investigation, and we spent a lot of time just being lashed.
One of the hardest things for a person to say is, "I don't know." And we had to say that a lot at that time, and that's difficult.
Well, the 2 days here in Philadelphia clearly indicated that there was a complete breakdown of communication and coordination between the CDC on the federal level, the state medical commissioner on the state level, and the city commissioner on the city level.
Usually you find that the Congress people are decent human beings, but this was just an ugly day.
Under extreme pressure, the CDC redoubles its efforts to crack this case once and for all. The fight is on to save their reputation. It is the 5th month since the outbreak, and the death toll stands at 29. Christmas approaches, and the usual round of parties begin. While people laugh and joke, the feeling of failure lingers in their minds.
I do remember going to a Christmas party. The person was over there and was asking about the Legionnaire's disease outbreak investigation, asking a lot of questions more than I was really capable of answering at the time. And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with this, but finally he walked away, and obviously he was a little bit disappointed. He said, "Well, I just don't understand it." He said, "We can send people to the moon," he said, "but we can't figure out this one."
These words stay with Joe, and during the holidays he goes into the office. The rogue bacteria he saw in the Q fever slides he had prepared 3 months ago have been playing on his mind.
And all of a sudden, I chance on this one slide where you didn't just see an individual bacterium. You saw a whole cluster of them all piled together. And I said to myself, there's something that's unusual about that.
What Joe starts to realize is that the strange rod-shaped bacteria he saw in August must be significant. At the time, they were dismissed as a contaminant. Now he realizes that in fact it might be the killer. There were relatively few bacteria present in his first tests. This must have been because he used antibiotics to remove contaminants. When Joe redoes the tests without the antibiotics, the samples emerge teeming with the mystery bacteria.
So at this point in time, you know, your interest starts to get up and you wonder whether or not you really have something, but you're not really sure, and you don't dare think about it, but there's a way that you can find out.
If this bacteria is the killer, it will have left a telltale trace in the victims' bodies, like a murderer leaves a clue. This trace is antibodies, our natural defense to illness.
And we performed the test and looked under the microscope. I remember late one evening, and all of a sudden there were some things that were lighting up. They were this bright yellow-green fluorescence, which indicates a positive test. And so there, for a second, you say, I think I might be onto something.
If this is the killer, he needs to see the same evidence for all the samples. Joe goes back to the samples taken from the victims' bodies to see if there are antibodies there. He sees them everywhere. Finding evidence of the antibodies is the proof that Joe needs that he has found the killer, a vicious and lethal bacteria. He names it Legionella pneumophila. Legionella after the legionnaires that died, and pneumophila meaning lung-loving.
From Washington, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. Federal health officials believe they've found the cause of Legionnaire's disease.
And late last week, Dr. McDade, who works in Dr. Shepard's laboratory, did come up with an isolate of a bacteria, or a bacteria-like organism that has been quite definitely associated with the Legionnaire's disease.
As the world's press rushes to get the story on the front pages, the CDC is uneasy. The discovery of this new disease reveals an alarming gap in scientific knowledge. Until now, scientists thought that all infectious diseases had been discovered. They were wrong. Fearing that the new killer may appear again at any moment, the race is on to work out what it does, where it lives, and most importantly, how to cure it. During the coming months, scientists at the CDC make amazing discoveries.
Well, it turns out that they're found in water, fresh water supplies. In fact, if you go just about anywhere and look in a fresh water supply, you're going to be able to find Legionella. And you take a shower or you see a fountain in the park or whatever, most likely they have Legionella.
At low levels in nature, Legionella is harmless, but man has made it lethal. When the bacteria multiplies in warm, stagnant water in buildings such as hotels, hospitals, and offices, they become death traps. With complex pipework and dark, warm corners, the bacteria thrives and multiplies unseen. Emerging from the system in lethal water particles. And if a person breathes in these water particles, the killer bacteria heads for the warmth of our lungs, multiplying, invading, and taking over the white blood cells designed to protect us. Infection is rapid. In days, the bacteria causes fever, diarrhea, and muscle pains. And if untreated, the lungs flood with infected liquid, organs fail, and then the victim dies. Anyone can get Legionnaires, but it does have favored victims. Smokers, People with weak immune systems and the elderly, all are vulnerable to the killer. Simple tests now exist to detect the disease, and strong antibiotics that attack infected cells can cure all but the most serious cases. But Legionnaire's disease looks like it could be pneumonia and flu, and so doctors often fail to carry out the tests. If they can't diagnose it, they cannot treat it, and so thousands continue to die without ever knowing what got them. Discovering Legionnaire's disease opens up frightening new possibilities. Scientists realize that this isn't the only new disease. There are many, many more unknown infections out there waiting to strike. Since 1977, at least 30 new diseases have been discovered, and more emerge all the time. Legionnaire's proved that the world must be constantly vigilant.
It was the first of what we called emerging infections, which became an important source of investigation and support, which led to uncovering things like E. coli 0157. It led to the SARS investigations, the Ebola investigations, as something very important, that infectious diseases were still an issue. It wasn't just chronic diseases that we had to be concerned about.
Fraser and the team were never able to prove that the killer came from the hotel's air conditioning system. The people of Philadelphia took a long time to forget that the magnificent old hotel was the cause of so many deaths. The Bellevue Stratford remained closed for years. And the CDC discovery came too late for the 29 victims who died from Legionnaire's disease that summer. Many of the dead were Legionnaires. All these veterans had survived war overseas, only to die after contact with a lethal bacteria in their own country. And nearly 20,000 people in America are hospitalized each year, and thousands die around the world of the same disease. But with many infections not diagnosed, this number may be much higher. Outbreaks like Philadelphia's in 1976 are not rare. They occur in hospitals, in shopping malls, in hotels. Legionella is still out there, and is still a massive killer.